Hello, and welcome to Awkward Family Conversations, where we try to help millennials and Gen Z, the Zoomers, figure it all out. I am here with my daughter, Addie, as always. And this season, where Addie and I are talking about life's transitions and milestones. And we'll get into that. But first, a little trivia about Addie. I think this is correct, but she's been she loves music and has for her entire life. But I believe her first real concert was Disclosure up in Sacramento. Am I remembering that correctly?
Not quite. My first real concert was Gotye at the
Gotye.
Theater, but I saw Disclosure shortly after, and that was at the Greek Theater in Berkeley.
Berkeley, I see. Very good. And you were in 8th grade, 9th grade?
I was a sophomore.
Sophomore. Oh, okay, so a little later than I thought. I remember that. You've always been interested in music, and I have been to probably 3 concerts in my entire life. And so you had 3 concerts before you were done with your sophomore year of high school. So.
Yes, I did.
Very good. Well, hello, Ed.
Hello, Dad. Obviously, I'm here with my dad, Rhett, who, on the subject of high school, still remembers his high school's fight song.
I do. Yes, I do.
You wanna give us a performance?
We are the demons ever glorious. We always fight with heads held high. And we will always be victorious, for we are out to do or die. Fight golden, beware all you other men, for we are out to win the fray. And we will be triumphant ever again, because it's the golden way. E-E-M-O. The EMO and S, fight on to victory. And then you sing it again.
I always forget that it's the Golden Demons. I love that. That's great.
Golden Demons. Yep. Mm-hmm. Golden High School, class of 1978, Golden, Colorado.
Yep. Not to be confused with Golden, Texas, where Casey Musgraves is from.
Exactly.
Yep. I'm so glad that we got the performance out of that. I've had that written down on a notepad in my apartment for a week, and then I spilled water on it. So right now it just says, still remembers fight song.
Yeah.
And Eric didn't notice it until it had water spilled on it. He said, "What is this?" And I said, "Don't worry about it." Yeah, he worried about it. So I had to explain. And it was a lot less exciting than he thought it was going to be.
Well, until he sees the rendition of the Golden High School fight song.
He's going to have to listen to this week's episode.
There you go. Very good. Speaking of that, what are we talking about today, Addie?
Well, today we're talking about what's the big deal about committing to a life partner.
Yeah, so this is going to be a little awkward, just because, as Addie is fully aware, and many other people are too, but Addie's mother and I are actually decommitting to a life partnership in the moment. We're going through proceeding with an amicable divorce. So we'll talk more about that in week 8 of our life transition series. But today we're talking about, when you're starting and you're deciding who you want to spend your life with, as far as you know, it's it is a big deal. These are life transitions. These are decisions. We've talked about leaving home as a young person. We've talked about moving, finding a place to live, a place to make your home. And now we're talking about somebody to share your life with, share your home and your dreams. And kind of getting in the traces together is, how I've heard it described, is a pretty good analogy for me. Kind of like oxen, getting in the traces and pulling the load that is your life's journey together, going in step, working together, sharing the burdens and also the celebrations. So it is a big deal. But it is a little ironic, I guess. And so I will be coming from a place of, well, what's worked and what hasn't worked, and why maybe there's some lessons to be learned from my own life experience here. So
yeah, definitely. You are at the end of a long-term relationship, and I am about to move in with my first partner. Well, first partner I've lived with. Obviously, I've had other partners.
You've had other partners, but
not this level of commitment.
I was going to say, have you ever thought of them as potential life partners?
My last one, yes. I thought that I was gonna end up with Jalen. And then we didn't obviously end up together, which was somewhat ironically my first sign that my parents might get a divorce, because Jalen and my relationship reminded the dynamic between the two of us reminded me a lot of your mom's dynamic. And
Also,
I'm a lot like mom, and he was a lot like you in terms of what he wanted out of a partnership and what I wanted out of a partnership. And so I was like, well, it looks like their relationship, so it's gotta work. That's what relationships should be. And then it ended, and then I found something better for me. And I was like, wait a second.
it's true that, I mean, there's always going to be echoes and similarities in relationships, but it's also true that each relationship is its own thing. And there are a lot of dynamics, a lot of things that happen in a relationship. And you're right, you can make parallels and you can certainly draw connections between them. I think, you say you're a lot like your mom. I think you, by specifying in terms of what you want out of a relationship, I can see that. But I don't think you're anything like your mother in a lot of other ways. But you're right, in terms of what you want in a relationship, you do want a more connected relationship that's full of
I want to be a team with my person. Really, the biggest difference between me and Jalen was that I wanted us to bring our lives together. I wanted to make a Venn diagram of our lives where the middle section was a lot bigger than the separate sections. I need a separate section. I want my own stuff, but I don't want that to be most of my life. And what he wanted was us to share a relationship and have separate lives. And so that led to a lot of tension between us and what we both wanted out of each other, and what I wanted him to do for me and what he expected from me as well. Because then it ended up with the stuff that I did do for him, like inviting him over and making dinner most of the week, he thought was nice, but it wasn't something that he saw as like us building a relationship. Whereas that's like a big part of my love language for someone is if I feed you.
Yeah.
So,
well, and it's, a relationship, a committed like partnership. These are things that you got to sort of sort out. How much time together, and what are we sharing? And I think those are things that deserve an intentional conversation and an agreement, an explicit agreement instead of an implicit assumption, which is really, we've talked a lot about relationships, and I think our season 2 was devoted to a lot of health, which included healthy relationships, and the importance of communication, which is at the foundation of any healthy relationship, is unfettered communication, especially an intimate partner. A life partner is one that
pretty sure I was dating Jalen at the time of that too, so that's gonna be, I should re-listen to that and see what was happening.
Right. Yeah, well, it's one of those things where you're and you can have open and honest communication and end up not in a relationship because, and hopefully that's the way it works, is not because you find out through experience and through observation, but actually through communication that, oh, maybe we are looking at different things.
That was why it ended, actually, was I had been feeling not satisfied for a while. And when I talked to my therapist about it, she was like, sometimes relationships do go through contraction periods. And so what I had assumed was happening was he was happy, but he was going through a big thing with his career, not working out the way that he planned on it going. And just a lot of stuff was happening in his life. So I was like, okay, he's probably just like a little distracted and he doesn't have as much time to spend on us in our relationship. So I'm just gonna wait through this period and we'll get through it and come out on the other side better for it. But I felt like I was kind of putting my own needs on the back burner, but I was like, it's fine, it's worth it. It's fine. And then we got in a little tiff, and it wasn't even a fight. And he made a comment about how he hadn't been happy for a long time. And I was like, wait, I haven't been happy for a long time. I thought you were happy, so I was sticking around for you. So then the thought that occurred to me at that moment was just like, oh, who are we doing this for? And then we ended it.
That's as relationship ends go, that's maybe not a bad one.
No, that was the best relationship ending I've ever had, was just realizing like, no, I think we're both done with this.
Yeah. Well, and it's true. These are the things you have to navigate as you sort of assess different relationships, and are they going to be, candidates? Are these partners candidates for a lifelong commitment? And that communication needs to be open and frank from the beginning. It's a little tough because you don't want to overshare when you're just meeting somebody and getting along. But as you have experiences and interactions with folks, and you become more just aware that you have feelings and emotions tied to it, it's really important to be open and honest in that communication. And that's hard because that's vulnerable, and it's risky, right? I mean, you might find that I'm really into this, and maybe he or she isn't, and that can hurt, because it's kind of like, oh, this is something I wanted, and I'm not going to get it, and that hurts me. And I think again, kind of that foundational element is communication, and through the communication, you find out, okay, are we compatible? Are we able to pull together? Do we share the same kind of values, so that we think about things and important things in the same ways? The things that are important to me are important to you. It's those kind of, communication's kind of at the heart of all that, but you do have to do the work, and then you have to test it, right? You have to see if people are really truly worthy of your trust. And so that involves sharing and being more vulnerable, and having that go forward. But it's interesting that, because what you described about your relationship, I would describe about my hope for a relationship and a partner isn't that I want a separate life. But through time, sometimes trust erodes, and you just start protecting yourself, which creates more, that Venn diagram, that part that you share becomes less, because you stop trusting, and you stop communicating, and you start protecting yourself. And when that starts happening, that's really the time that you need to, when you notice that I'm not sharing something because I'm not sure how my partner is going to take it, or I'm not sure, and I'm not saying my own experience here, this could be some of Don's experience as well, but I hope I'm not talking out of school. I don't think I am, but these are things that happen in long-term relationships. And when that happens, like you said, when you started deferring your needs because you thought you were taking care of Jalen, that was fine, but it probably merited a discussion to make
it
sure he
definitely
was
did.
on the same.
And it also, what I realized, because I started dating Eric so soon after I broke up with Jalen, and I really didn't want to do that. But Eric was too good, and I was like, okay, like I can't, yep. But what I had realized was that I had been alone for a lot longer than I had been single. And that I had not been talking to Jalen about what was going on with me. And I had turned a lot more to calling mom and talking to Callie and talking to my friends. Where at the end of our relationship, I got COVID while we were dating, and he never got it.
Yeah.
That was where, like, we were spending so little time together, that when we met up after I was out of my quarantine, because I broke up with him in quarantine over the phone, not my best moment, but also the only option.
Yeah.
So we met up afterwards, and he asked a question about a conversation I had with my boss 2 weeks before we broke up that I just had never filled him in on.
Yeah.
And so I think that if we had had that talk when I had started having those feelings, we would have come to the conclusion that we should break up earlier, because if I had been like, I'm deferring my needs to take care of yours, he would have been like, you're not taking care of my needs.
Yeah, my needs are not what you think they are. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been like, okay, so what are we doing? And then I would have had that time more purposefully alone than I actually ended up having it.
Yeah.
I still think, it wasn't, I don't regret anything about our relationship. It probably could have ended sooner and would have been fine. But it definitely, like, looking back on it, I'm like, okay, I learned some big lessons about just when to tell people, and also, like, when you're in a really, like, a committed romantic relationship with someone, I learned the power of just saying whatever's on your mind, even if you haven't come to the conclusion of what your thought is. If you're just feeling uneasy about something, like, you don't have to have the why, you don't have to have a fleshed out explanation before you can bring it to your partner. And that's the philosophy I carried into dating Eric. And from the beginning, it's just worked better, because we've just both been like, I feel weird about calling you my boyfriend. I don't know why I feel weird, but I don't want to be official yet. And he was like, yeah, I feel weird about having a girlfriend. I don't want to be official yet either. And I was like, cool, but we're going to be exclusive and still like date. He was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, like I'm happy with that. That's what I want because I don't know why I don't want this.
We're just not going to label it this.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that transparency is critical to a healthy relationship. And, and you will be tested at times. And when, when you stop sharing every detail, and, it's one of those things too. I mean, some people have a greater tolerance for listening to a lot of just, how was your day? And it's, well, here's 18, 20 minutes of step-by-step everything that happened to me today. I mean, that can be a little bit overbearing. And that's something I struggle with when somebody starts talking to me at that kind of detail. It's kind of like I lose focus and start thinking about stuff. And then I need to be honest at that point and say, you know what, you're kind of overwhelming with a lot of data points and I'm not listening to you. I just want to know what important things happened to you today and so you got to find that right balance. But the point is that you need to share something. And, when you start guarding your heart and guarding your mental health and guarding whatever, because you feel you don't feel totally comfortable sharing. That's an important thing to be aware of. And I would say that that obviously happened in our marriage, where Don and I stopped talking to each other as regularly and as honestly. And that's and then that was a two-way street, although I was probably the more reticent of the two of us anyway. But when that starts happening, it's a good thing to just sort of say, okay, let's deal with this now, as opposed to letting this kind of go on and this becomes a habit, and then you're like you said, you're living more independent lives, and that can work. I mean, it has worked, but it needs to be a conscious and it needs to be an explicit understanding, because otherwise you end up with hurt feelings. You get one partner who thinks, like you did, oh, I'm giving you space, and the other partner thinking, this is just what I need, and I'm not really looking at this as a sacrifice on your part. This is just how I think the relationship is, so I'm fine. And you're expecting some reciprocity at some point, or that deferring your needs, and those kind of things, those assumptions can build up on both sides, and that's where I think a lot of challenge comes in. To your intimate partner. I mean, this is going to be the most important relationship in your life. I mean, even with children, even with parents and siblings that are, people that feel very close to other folks, the partner you choose and who chooses you is the central relationship in your life.
Relationship you'll have for sure. Like just on any level, not even just necessarily sexual, but that was before
that naked time.
I hate to admit it, but Eric and I spend a lot of naked time, and it helps a lot. It is a literal, just like open, honest communication thing. And every time I think about it, I'm like, I hate this. I hate that we're doing naked time, but at the same time, it rocks.
It works. I mean, it's hard to have secrets when you're just both naked, right?
Yeah, you can't do it. We had to have like a serious conversation recently. And I was in a sweatshirt, but I didn't have pants on. And I was like, okay, we need to talk. And he got like nervous. And I was like, I'm not breaking up with you. If I was breaking up with you, I'd have pants on. He was like, okay, cool. That's the sign then. And I was like, yeah, if I ever put on clothes to talk to you, get worried. But the one time we've gotten in, I even hesitate to call it like a big fight. It was just like the only time that I felt mad at him. And then even like that lasted for like 10 whole minutes, and then we got over that, and then it was like, all right, we've got an issue and we need to deal with it together, because we've had conflict in our relationship, but we haven't had like fights, which is awesome, and that's what I want, because I hate fighting with my partner. And so it's been very much like there's a conflict and it's us versus the conflict. It's us figuring out how to get over this obstacle together. But the first time it came up was I have a lot of trauma relating to being cheated on. Thank you to my first boyfriend for that, your second boyfriend, for that one. But he had a friend coming from out of town who was going to stay with him. And it was a female friend of his. And like, there's no history there. She's just like one of his best friends. And so I was like, okay, this is not going to be a problem for me. I was so determined not to get triggered that I was like, I'm not even going to acknowledge it. So I did not tell him before she came to town that this could be triggering for me. And shockingly, crazy, it was.
Yeah.
So the day that he was like spending the day with her, he kept texting me like, oh, we're at this coffee shop, we're at this bar now. And he wasn't saying like, come meet us. So I wasn't going to meet them. But what he was implying, and what I would have assumed had I not been in like the guarded state, would have been like, oh, duh, do you want me to come hang out? And because he didn't know he had to handle me with like extra care that weekend, he did not know to do that. So I got mad at him. And then when we talked about it the next day, I was like, realized that the only reason we had that fight at all was because I didn't communicate beforehand. I didn't tell him the little thing I was maybe worried about possibly being a thing. So at that point, we just instituted a rule of, if there is anything that you are worried about might be becoming a conflict, just say it like first off, right when you know.
Yeah,
And that
it's
is
a lot easier to, it's a lot easier to avoid conflict by being communicated ahead of time, or not avoid it, but you can diffuse it by talking about it transparently ahead of time, and then trying to fix things once feelings are hurt.
Yeah, like
once damage is done.
Resentment that's building up is just going to make anything worse. So like the serious talk we had recently, something was off, and we both knew that something felt off. And then I found out, I don't even want to say I found out he was hiding something from me, because it wasn't. He made a conscious decision not to tell me something on the day that it happened because he didn't want to upset me on that day. Or he didn't want me to think that I would interpret it the way that he didn't mean it. So he was like, I'll tell her later. He told me later, and then I had felt like he had hidden something from me, which is also a huge trigger for me. So then I was upset with him. So we talked about it, and I was like, yo, just tell me something. And if you're worried I'm going to interpret it in a way you don't want it to be interpreted, just say that when you tell me. And he was like, yeah, you're super right. I don't know why I didn't tell you.
Well, he was trying to protect your feelings, and he's trying to make you, I mean, there, motivations, bad, I had a boss who used to tell me, good decisions don't always lead to good outcomes. And the good and bad decisions don't always lead to bad outcomes. Often they do. Most of the time they do. But, some of the time you make a decision, you go through the right decision process, and it turns out badly. And that's the thing, is if you're trying to, it came from a good place. He wanted to protect your feelings. He wanted to make sure that you weren't upset, or you didn't have a negative emotion or a negative experience with that. And so he was protecting you, but he was also, there's protecting you, but he also wasn't trusting you in a lot of ways, right? And so that respect for your partner
was that I was like, I want you to expect me to be able to understand you. Like I expect that of you, and I think that I have proven to you that you can. And he was like, yeah, I wasn't thinking, obviously, otherwise I would have. He was like, I had the thought, and then was like, I'll tell her later. And it was like, we're talking like a day turnover between this. It wasn't like he waited like multiple weeks. So it was easy to
still, but that's the thing. He didn't respect your ability to handle, to emotionally handle it. And but you've been together a year. It takes a lifetime. My parents who've been together 62 going on 63 years still get into little things, because that's what happens. People make assumptions, they take shortcuts, they don't think things all the way through, or sometimes they just feel like, I'm going to protect you because that's what I do. Part of being a partner is protecting you and guarding your emotional health, your physical health. So I'm gonna do this, but when you take agency out of somebody's hands, which is what happens when you do those sorts of things, it's in some respects it's a lack of trust or a lack of respect or lack of confidence in their ability to deal with it. And those are trade-offs that every relationship goes through and has, and sometimes it's appreciated, right? If you had a dozen things on your plate and things were going crazy and you were really stressed, maybe bringing that thing up on that day was maybe not a great idea. So it's even situational, right? One day it may have been a great thing to do, and another day maybe not, because on that day when you have the capacity and the emotional reserves to kind of process something and take it through, especially when he's curating that with you, helping you understand exactly what happened and why he was thinking and what, you can talk yourself through those things. So, these are the relationship questions as you consider a life partner. These are the things that you just have to kind of go through. And a lot of it's experiential, but the more transparent and vulnerable you allow yourself to be, the stronger sense you'll have as to whether or not this is a partnership that's worth investing in and that's worth committing to. Because I got to tell you, I just told you, your grandparents have been together for 62, going on 63 years. That's a lot of time to spend in each other's company. And, they're changing. I mean, a life is a long time. And, the life partnership, when you step into those traces together, your expectation is, we're going to be doing this for 50 to 60 years. We're going to be shoulder to shoulder pulling in the same thing. And that means we've got to be talking all the time. That means we've got to be, both of us, exerting energy towards the goals that we have decided to pursue together. That means we have to develop goals that we're going to pursue together. And it doesn't mean that we become one person or one thing, that we give up our individuality, but it means that we put aside our individuality part of the time so that we can be part of the same team. And finding that partner is a really powerfully good thing when you have that partner that you step in with and feel like, yeah, we're pulling together, and we're doing all these things and we're working together. And when you start to have doubts about that, when you start to have that sense of, geez, is this really working out? That's the time to, again, you got to be vulnerable and you got to be transparent if you're going to have a partnership that lasts, because you're going to change. Your perspectives change as you age, as you accumulate life experiences, as you add to your family, as you move places, as things around you happen, as job changes. I mean, life is a very dynamic experience, and the way that you keep your partnership, the way that you stay together, connected in those traces, is by talking to each other and making sure that you guys understand each time, that everybody is we're on the same page. And you have to work every day. You have to work to, to stay on that same page, because when you stop, and, your mother and I stopped, not entirely. We don't have I wouldn't say we have a terrible marriage, but it's not the marriage that we each want. And a lot of it was because we stopped talking about things that were super important. And
that was actually, what Jalen said when we met up to talk about, he had some questions and wanted to get closure on things. And one of the first things he said was, when did we stop talking?
Yeah. And he did. And, and you'd been together, what, a couple of years?
At that point, yeah, 3 years.
3 years. I didn't realize it was that long. But yeah, I mean, and that's, yeah. So, I mean, you guys had changed. You'd gone from a college student into
yeah, for me, that was, when I started dating him, I was 19. When I broke up, I was 22. And that's not just any 3 years. They're very big 3 years.
Those are important. Yeah, there's a lot of life transition there happening.
It felt like towards the end, and what he told me after we had broken up and we were talking, he made a lot of decisions that I didn't know about that were similar to the removing agency kind of thing, because he didn't trust me to respond a certain type of way, but then he would be mad at me for making him make those decisions.
So he didn't give you the chance to be a part of it, but resented you.
Yeah, he would assume the reaction I would have. And most of these decisions would be stuff like hanging out with female friends of his who didn't necessarily like me, which was a huge trigger for me because I got cheated on with a couple of those. But that was when I was 19, when that was like an issue. And even then I talked to him and told him at 19, like, I don't want you to change your behavior for this. I don't want you to give in for this, because you're going to create a monster and it will never be satisfied. Like, the thing about PTSD is that it's telling me this is what I want, and you not having female friends is going to make me comfortable, but it's not. No. That's never going to work. There's never going to be enough if you appease it. Just do what you need to, and I will deal with it.
Be honest and open and help me be aware that this is
exactly. It was like, you might just have to like, exactly. It was like, you might have to like reassure me a little more than you maybe want to, but like, I need something. But like, I need you to do it. And then he stopped doing it because he was like, oh, she's gonna be mad at me if I do this. And at that point, like, that was closer to when I was 22. And I was like, well, I've been in therapy for 4 years, dude. Like, I literally won't be mad now. Like, I worked through that.
That's the,
But
that's the point where the communication needs to happen, right? And if he's feeling, and it's possible that, because this can happen, right, is that your need for that reassurance exhausts me. And that's a lot of energy for me. But rather than just sort of say, okay, I'm going to ignore it and go away, he needs to talk to you about that. Say, hey,
and
look.
that was one of the things too, was that our love languages were essentially inverse. Like our second two we had in common.
Yeah.
But my number one was words of affirmation, and that was his least high one.
Yeah, I suspect that's true of your mother and me too, is I don't need a lot of validation, and she does. She wants
I
it all
joke
the
that
time.
Jalen would have been happy if I just said I love you one time at the beginning of our relationship, and he would have known it for the rest of our relationship that we were together.
You would have assumed it, right? Yeah.
And
I
I'm
told
like,
you I loved you. If it changes, I'll let you know.
several times a day. Like I need to be reminded. Like that is how I experience love in its purest form, is you telling me you love me.
Yeah.
And it was like we tried to find our middle ground with that, but it was just so much effort all the time. And then once I started dating Eric, I realized like we never had to have conversations about what we wanted our communication to look like. Like it just looked like that from the beginning. And I was like, oh, and like we've talked since about it. We've been like, one of the things I love about our relationship is that it has looked like this from the beginning. So keep up the good work. But it was never something we had to like figure out or like learn for each other. We just kind of knew going into it. And that was one of the first clues that I could spend a really long time with him, because he got me on a level that I've never been understood before.
Well, it sounds like you guys have a relationship that doesn't require as much conscious but about it, constant sort of conscious integration, right? I mean, you guys naturally do what each other needs, and that can be great because that's super efficient, right? Energy efficient. You don't have to create conscious energy and intent and then follow through on it. But that doesn't mean that a relationship that doesn't have that can't work. It just means that you got to be honest about what each other needs, and you have to be honest about whether or not you can be that for each other. And that's one of the things that, as Don and I have kind of talked about the end of our marriage, is we're doing a better job of kind of talking to each other about what it is that we need, and we're also being sort of recognizing that, oh yeah, that's not something you can really do very well, and it requires a huge amount of energy and a huge amount of sacrifice on your part to fill that need for me.
Well,
and that's not especially fair, and you're not willing to do that, and I'm not willing to go without that. So we need to kind of say, yeah, are we the best partner for each other right now? The answer, I think, is no.
That was really what happened a lot with Jalen too, when we were thinking about moving in together but decided not to, was because of our conflict resolution. Because when I'm having conflict with someone that I love, I want to sit down and talk about it. I'm very good at processing my emotions, and I can do it almost instantly. So if we've got a problem, we're going to sit down, we're going to work through it, and then I'm good to go. Everything's fine. And that is not at all how he functioned. He was I need to not talk to you for like possibly multiple days kind of thing. And I was like, so we tried a lot of different things. And I was like, can you just like tell me you love me before you ghost for a couple of days? And he was like, no, I just don't want to talk at all. And I was like, well, I can't do that because I need resolution to be immediate. He was like, I need it to specifically not be immediate. And I was like,
well, that's good.
Well, this is incompatible. Like this just doesn't work then.
Well, that's right. And that's a good thing to be aware of. And again, can you deal with that? Can you deal with that uncertainty? And can he deal with maybe that need to be engaged? And you guys decided, no, you really couldn't.
It was like we tried a lot of middle grounds, but it always just ended up with one of us unhappy, which wasn't with it. And then with Eric, he is like me in that if there is conflict, and like the time we got in a fight, he found out I was mad like right before I was about to go out with my friends. So I was like, we can't talk now. I don't want to do it over text. Can we just talk tomorrow? And he was like, okay. And then the rest of his night, he was just in like a terrible mood and ended up meeting me while I was out with friends. And at that point I was drunk and I was like, okay, we can't talk about this right now, but we're good. Don't worry. Like, I love you. We're good. I'm happy. I'm not leaving you. But he was like really not having a good time because he was like, I need to work this out now. And I was like, same. Like that's the first, I also want to work it out now. Like
I used to work
So,
with a woman who told me at a party she was with her husband, and they got crosswise, and she was like, "You, me on the balcony now, middle of the
yep.
party. I'm not waiting. We're going to sort this because I have to. This has to be sorted right now. Otherwise, I can't. I just won't be present, and I won't be able to enjoy the party. So let's just get this done now." She was like, "That's just the way I am. If something's bothering me, it's got to be. We've got to address it now. It doesn't mean we have to fix it now, but we have to talk it through and know what we're going to do and
Just like have
get
a
it together."
plan is really all I want. Like I don't even necessarily need a resolution. I just need like we're on the same team and here's us working together to make this better.
Yeah.
Which, like that's all I ever needed. But with a person who specifically needs, give me a second and then we'll figure out our plan. Like there's no way to force those together when it's as desperate of a need on my part and as desperate of a need on his part. Like that was something that's not something that I can go into a relationship and be flexible about.
Right, and it's important to know those things. How we can Google. We don't do 2 minutes of internet research anymore. But if we did, I'm sure we would find a whole handbook on. Well, I gave you for Christmas. I gave you the questions, right? 100
Yes.
questions or whatever. Have you read that book?
Hard questions.
Hard questions. Have you looked at them?
I have. We haven't gone through it yet, but I just found it the other day. I was in my book room and I was thinking about it. And I was like, what bookshelf did I put it in? I found it and I was like, okay, next time Eric comes over and we have like several hours, let's look at some of these because I do want to go through it before we move in together. Like,
That I would recommend it. I mean, it's a book and it's called The Hard Questions. I don't remember the author, but it was recommended to me by my therapist, actually. Not recommended to me, but just referred to it. And it just made me think that, especially for people starting relationships, it can help make explicit what I think in the absence of being explicit, people just kind of assume, oh, of course, we're on the same page about this stuff. And probably for the most part you are. But I would expect that as you talk, you will unearth, as you consider the questions, you'll unearth places where you aren't in alignment. And, anytime this is about transparency and communication. You get to talk about why it is that I think this and why you think differently about this particular question. And then it's a question is, can we resolve this? And if we can't, can we live with this being unresolved? And so, if the question is, how do you raise your children? And you have diametrically opposite opposed views of that. If you're not going to have children, then it's kind of a moot point. It doesn't really matter how you want to raise your children. So, you have to kind of talk through all that stuff. And then you have to kind of make an assessment. It's going to be virtually impossible to find, a person in the world who will fill everything and align it perfectly with how you want your relationship to be. So at some point, and this is the compromise part of our discussion about committing to a life partner, is you got to recognize when the benefits are worth compromising, some of the things that maybe aren't quite so important. So know what's important to you, know what you have to have, be happy. And then decide, well, if I don't have this, I won't be ecstatic, but can I be happy enough in this partnership to for this still to be the thing that I want to devote 60 years of my life and a ton of my energy, because I'm going to get back that sense of togetherness. I mean, we haven't really talked about why do you want a life partner? And I think the reason you want it is sharing your life is incredibly rich.
Humans are social creatures, just on a biological level. We're built to live in communities, and part of having a romantic partner.
But it's more than just, the romantic partner is kind of the person you share everything with, and good and bad. And it's somebody that will help defray and diffuse some of the stresses when it becomes too overwhelming. You've got somebody you can trust that in your heart is going to be fully supportive of you. And if you don't feel that way, then your life partner is probably not the person you want as in that role. But if, a life partner, ideally that life partner is somebody that, shares your stresses and shares your burdens, but also, and this is the part I think we don't really think a lot about, is shares your joy. Dawn has a friend of hers who's a single mother and has been really her whole life. And she said the hardest thing about that was not sort of the economic hardship, although that was hard. And it wasn't just the physical demands, which were also very hard, because she had no partner to sort of trade off. I mean, when the baby was up, and that meant mom had to be up, and there was nobody to kind of take up that slack. And those were hard. But she said the hardest thing was not having somebody to turn to when that baby made that first step and share that joy of this is so cool. And she was alone for that. And it was still a great moment and everything, but it would have been so much richer if she'd been able to turn to a partner and say, we're sharing this moment, and isn't this the coolest thing? And have somebody say, yeah, this is awesome. And that is why we want a life partner. Somebody to step in the traces with you, because you're going to share everything, good and bad.
Yeah, it's not to say that having a kitten is exactly like having a child.
No, it isn't.
But when
actually the same, but not the same.
Yeah, when I got Missy, the first day that she came out and was like coming up to us, Eric was there for it. And actually, funny stories, he went into her little private room before I did that morning. And then he came out, and then I went in, and she came out, and she just put her nose on mine. She gave me a little nose boop, and it was so cute. And I was so excited. And like Eric was right there for it. And it was so fun to like share that together. He actually told me after that she had done it to him first, but he did it whatever ruined my day by telling me that she had done it to him first. But it was like that moment was so special for me with little angry Missy demon child, where she got comfortable around us, and sharing it with the person that was raising this kitten with me was a really big difference than doing it on my own.
Yeah. So I mean, it's that. I mean, you want a partner because it helps. I mean, you're right. We're social people. We are creatures. We need those interconnections, and that intimate partnership. It helps when stresses are high to have somebody you can turn to and say, hey, I'm really scared, or I'm really freaked out. And they can be like, hey, I got you. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm always going to be with you no matter what happens here. And if you can trust that, then that's a great relief, and that's a great comfort. And it's equally exciting and comforting and joyous to have somebody that you can turn to and say, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm glad that you're here. So I can tell you about it, and you can share it with me and be happy for me. And it's about extending yourselves in totally unrestrained and unconstrained ways. And when you can have that great partnership like that, then that makes the effort worthwhile. That makes the commitment every day, just thinking about each other every day, putting somebody else's needs ahead of your own, the sacrifices you make. I mean, to me, the relationships, how important a relationship is to you is you can tell how important it is by what you're willing to sacrifice. How much are you willing to sacrifice of yourself to make sure that this other person, is taken care of, and
willing to be very nice to his very annoying roommates.
Yeah. And that's So, if you're willing to, people say, I'll die for my family, I'll die for my partner, I'll die for my kids, those things. I mean, that's a pretty big sacrifice you're willing to make, which tells you how deeply felt these relationships are. And that life partnership is going to be the most important relationship you'll have in your life. And kids and parents and sisters and friends are all really important, but that intimate partner, that life partner, is the one.
It's the most dynamic one that I've found so far. Like conflict between Callie and me is, we joke, the 78.5 seconds rule. So we need an amount of time and then it's done, but we don't have to talk about every conflict. Like Callie and I have only ever had to have a serious conversation about the way we treated each other one time. And that was actually in Rehoboth Beach, because that was after I had gone to college at that point. And for the last several years, I had felt like she was acting like a second mom of mine. And I was like, I want you to be my sister. I want to be able to tell you the weird stuff I'm doing. And I don't want you to go tell mom because you're worried about me or whatever. Like, I want you to be my friend. I was like, I'm an adult and I know stuff. Like, I can take care of myself and I'm okay. And she was like, I feel like you don't respect that I'm an adult. And I was like, I totally do. That's why I tell you stuff. So we had like an emotional conversation about how we should treat each other moving forward. But we've only had to do that once. And she's probably my, longest term close relationship
Well,
since
that's
it
true.
was
Your siblings will be your longest relationships in your lives because you guys were born 4 years apart. And so you've known each other since you were born. Um, and you will probably, live well into your 80s. And so you will have 80 years of, which is more than you'll have for your life partner.
the dynamic nature of the like intimate partner relationship is very different, and like that's the one that I compare it to the most, because Callie's my other most significant relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we talk every day in the same way that I do with a partner.
Mhm. But not as
But
frequently, or not as long.
like, it's also like she's my sister too. Like she's always gonna be there no matter
Mhm.
how much I mess up. It's not like I can do something, short of like, there are things I can do to get rid of my sister that I won't do.
Well, there's a famous quote that says, family is the place when you have nowhere else to go, they have to take you. And that's
Yeah.
a pretty accurate way of thinking about it. No matter what happens, family is there for you because they pretty much have to be.
There's kind of like there's like a have to duty sense with it, but with your
Exactly.
partner, it's someone that you are literally choosing every single day.
Yes.
And there is no like blood relation, and after you break up, there's no, okay, well, I guess I'll just go back to this person because they won't have you back.
Right.
So I definitely realized as I started getting into serious relationships, like, oh, this is really different from anything I've ever done before. This is really intense.
It is, and you hit on a really important part when you said you have to commit that every day. I mean, I talk about marathon training because that's something I do. And, you have to choose the marathon every day until you run it. Once you decide I'm going to run a marathon in 6 months, you have to choose the marathon every day. I can't go out late at night because I need my sleep to prepare for the marathon. I have to get this workout in. I have to get up in the morning and do this thing so I can get my workout in so that I can prepare. I have to choose the marathon every day. But that has an endpoint. That's 6 months away. With an intimate partnership, it's open-ended. You have to choose each other every day. And that doesn't mean that you're putting other things on hold or you're only doing this thing. But it does mean that when it comes to commitment, you don't get a day off from that commitment.
And it's not just like, it's not, loving someone can be a feeling, but it's also a choice. Like you do have to choose to continue to act on that.
Well, that's the act. Yeah, you're choosing to act. You don't choose the emotion necessarily, but you choose the act. And you want to demonstrate that every day. And beyond that, I mean, you've got to feel it every day. You've got to recognize in a conscious way, hey, I'm part of a partnership. I made a commitment here. And I need to honor that commitment, and you should want to honor that commitment. And it's a daily thing every day. And it should be a source of joy, and it should be, you should feel good about it. And that doesn't mean every day. It doesn't mean you're not going to have fights and conflicts, and there's not going to be days where you're low energy and you're just like, oh crap, I just don't want to have to, clean the kitchen one more time, even though it's my job. It's just, there's things like that come up. But at the same time, it's kind of like, what, I have to, every day I want to recommit to, this is my partner. This is my partner, and for better or for worse, and this is a crappy day, or boy, this is a great day, but I'm still committing every day. And that's an important part of a life partnership, is that constant, consistent commitment.
Yeah, and that's been the nice thing about, there's so many nice things. I can't just say the nice thing about Eric and my relationship. But one of the many nice things is that we have had that talk. We had that talk early on, because I, like my father, am very type A. So I am the person on the first date to be like, tell me your politics. I can't have kids. Do you want to still be here? Yeah. Just because I'm not going to waste my time dating someone who voted for Trump, or someone who's like, I need a huge family, because it's never going to work. I'm never going to change my mind on that, because I literally cannot produce children. Yeah. So it's like early, I think I actually told Eric on our first date, like, I can't have kids, because that's what I'd be doing. But we got a lot of the big stuff out, like dealt with in the first like single digits dates of like, this is how I feel about sex and here's my trauma. Yeah. And that just kind of set us up for like a very good open communication that has led to us talking about like, when we go through those periods of like, I'm feeling really exhausted and coming over right now just feels like too much for me to do. And we can still have those moments of like, I just need to be alone, even though we have plans. I can't right now, and neither of us takes it personally, and that's been like very nice.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and again, it just that bedrock, that fundamental piece is the communication and the trust. I mean, so that you need both, right? You need to communicate. You need to actually articulate and say what it is that you're feeling and thinking, and what your perceptions are and what your perspectives are. But there also is the willingness then to say or to share that to. I mean, so one of the things, and I'll cop to this here. One of the things in our marriage is that I didn't want to have to deal with a lot of my emotions, and I just didn't, and I didn't do it in a conscious way. It was just really uncomfortable for me to talk about emotions and to experience emotions. I don't trust my emotions, and they scare me, and so I don't go there. And again, it's not a conscious, I don't want to go there. It's just, I just don't go there. And so, when your mother would want to have conversations that were emotional, I just couldn't. I'd just shut down and be like, I'm not, no, I'm fine. Everything's good. And that's, even if the willingness to communicate was there, I couldn't be vulnerable. I couldn't share.
Saying you have to be intentional with your communication.
Not just intentional, but you have to be willing to be open and vulnerable. And I couldn't get there. And it wasn't always, but it was at important parts in our marriage, and it was certain times in our marriage where I just didn't trust myself and didn't trust her, and I just didn't. The whole emotional thing was just too frightening for me to unveil. I'm very good at pushing down all of those feelings and have been throughout my life, and they sit there and the pressure builds, and it scares me that, oh geez, if we're gonna open this up, I don't trust myself to be able to manage this in a way that I'm comfortable. And so I just didn't do it. And again, it wasn't a conscious thing like, oh, I'm not going there. It was just my mind would be like, no. And I wasn't aware of it, but I would tell her, no, everything's fine. And it wasn't.
I always thought emotionally I took after mom more.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I mean, both of my.
I've got more of you than I thought I did.
What's that?
I think I've got more of you in me than I thought I did, because towards the end of my regular therapy, after I had broken up with Jalen, I told my therapist, and I was like, yeah, I broke up with Jalen. And she was like, wait, what? So we talked about it. And as we were talking, she was like, if I had asked you 2 weeks ago if you were thinking about breaking up with him, you would have said no, even though you were. And she was like, I think you're just really good at lying to yourself. And that has stuck with me. Because yikes.
Yeah.
But I realized that, yeah, I am really good when things are unpleasant or scary, or I don't want them to be true, is usually what the biggest thing is when I don't want something to be what's actually happening. Nope. I'm just like, oh, I can make that not a thing. And that doesn't work.
Well, no, not in the long term. I mean, it did relieve stress for me in the short term, but of course what it did was it moved the stress onto your mother unfairly, right? I mean, she wanted to have these discussions that were emotionally evocative, and I couldn't get there because, and I think your characterization is maybe ungenerous, but not inaccurate, that, I can lie to myself. I can tell myself without being aware of it that, no, it's not a problem. Mm-hmm. Oh no, I'm not really having these emotions. So, that was me not wanting to deal with it. But again, it wasn't a conscious thing of me. The conscious Rhett wasn't going, oh, don't go there. The unconscious Rhett was like, this could really blow up, and that's really scary. You got all these emotions that you're going to have to process, and you're not good at, and you don't do well with those kind of situations, or there's the fear that you're not going to do well, that it's going to be just too overwhelming and you'll lose emotional control. And that for me is really, really a powerful motivating force for me, is that control is something that I really want. I value control. I've learned that from my culture and family, being raised, and also a man in the world, is, you're not allowed to express strong emotions. And so, so for many years, it was kind of like when our discussions would sort of prompt there, that was kind of the third rail for me. I would just go away. I would withdraw, and I would just kind of say, no, I'm good. And again, wasn't conscious. I wasn't trying to be a jerk, but it left, your mother really unsatisfied and hurt, and called into question a lot of our relationship. So as a result, not just of that, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into a decision to end the marriage. And as I've said, it's very amicable. We're pretty respectful, and I think we understand the people we are. We're just not very good for each other. As friends, we're great, but as romantic partners, we just can't be that life partner, that intimate partner for each other. That gives us the positive things that we were talking about earlier, to a large degree. I mean, we could have continued to stay married, but it would have been just an okay marriage, and we want to give each other the chance to maybe have something better than that.
That was one of the feelings I had early on in my relationship with Eric. Was the feeling I always had with Jalen was, I could make this work. I could make this work. I can do this forever. But the feeling I got very early on with Eric was, oh, I want to feel like this forever. I want to make this work. And that made a world of difference for me when I realized, like, oh, I can do a lot of things, but that doesn't mean I want to do them. And that was
how much effort.
Not to go to vet school too, which is not about committing to a life partner, but the way that I had been approaching thinking about vet school was, yeah, I can make it through vet school, and then I can make money in the animal field being a vet, and I could be a vet instead of I didn't want to be a vet, but I could be a vet. And that's not how you get through a very expensive several years of school. It's not out of, I could do this. So that forced me to sit back and be like, what do I actually want? Because I realized that
argument, right? The passion, and that's true. You should have a passion for your life's work, but you also need a passion for your life's partner. Yeah. And what you experienced with Jalen was you didn't have that passion. You could have done it, and that's kind of where your mom and I are now. We could do this and be comfortable. We've had a very comfortable marriage, but is comfortable really what we want from that life partnership? And we've talked about it, and we said, no, let's try for something better. And we know we can't be that for each other, so let's release each other so that we can find that partner that may be more fulfilling. And of course, the risk is, that we end up alone. And that's the risk that comes with this, with this life partnership.
Is that we're getting into the awkward part of awkward family conversations. Are you planning on dating when you move to Montana?
It's not something. I mean, I didn't date when I was a young guy. I find it hard to believe that I date as an old guy. I mean, do I want a life partner? Sure. I mean, for the reasons we've talked about, right? Somebody to share both the burdens and the joys. But it's not something I'm thinking about right now. I've got so many decisions I have to make just about my own path. And once I make those decisions, and once I get settled wherever it is that I end up, and once I kind of get grounded and figure out how I'm going to make my life work for me, then I'll be open to relationships. But I don't have the intent at this point. I've got no intention to make that a priority and to seek that out. But as you discovered with Eric, sometimes life presents you with a partner that.
All of my long-term partnerships have gone on like that, where I've been like, I'm good alone. I got this. I feel good. I'm going to enjoy being single. And then like the next week I meet someone and I'm like, no, go away. Yeah. But I think that I joke about it, but I think that's the best time to meet someone, is when you are just satisfied with yourself and you know yourself and you know what you want and you feel like, I don't really subscribe to the whole, like, you have to love yourself before you can love anyone else. But I do think you have to be satisfied with yourself before you can be satisfied in a relationship. Because for me, it was like, every time I got to a place where I wasn't just overlooking all of the things that I'd have to compromise just because I didn't want to be alone, I met someone that actually met my needs. Yeah. And that was very much what happened with Eric, especially because I had all these plans. I was like, I'm not going to date, and then I'm only going to date women. I'm not going to date another man. And then another man showed up. But it was so worth it. I'm so glad I did.
Well, you can't, man plans, God laughs. It's, you can move in a direction, but you've got to be flexible enough to sort of recognize opportunity and allow for change and differences, different things that happen, because life is we've talked about it, is a dynamic journey, and things will happen. And so, just set your intention, but, allow some flexibility to accommodate it. So, but I do think that you need to be on a if you're going to be in a position to start a really productive, constructive relationship, you need to be pretty secure with yourself. You've got to, that foundational, Will, we talked about this when in season 2, that, the relationship with yourself is kind of the foundational relationship. You need to be conscious of who you are and understand what you want, because otherwise, it's what we talked about. If you don't know where you're going, you're probably going to end up there. And so you've got to know what's important to you. And this is where that questions book comes in, because it allows you to say, hey, this is how I think about these pretty important questions in life, and then compare your answers to your partner and be able to say, okay, is this, or your potential partner, and are we compatible here? Is this going to work? And do we have enough overlap in our Venn diagram? I like that imagery, by the way, but the analogy, but is there enough overlap here that we can make this a really constructive partnership, and be those that, get in the traces together and pull the way we want to for the next 50, 60 years, or in my case, 20 to 30 years. So,
yeah.
Well, this has been an interesting conversation, because we have the young person in the position of having a really constructive, happy partnership, and the old person exiting one that hasn't worked quite as well. It's not been a disaster by any means, but it hasn't been that, the life partnership that,
I definitely went through a little thing when you guys announced that you were getting divorced of, I just need to break up with Eric, because if they can't make it work, then there's no hope for me. I got to go. I can't do it. So fortunately talked that down. Yay. That was, I had some interesting things happen with processing my emotions around the divorce, that it was fine. Like, it was not as big of a deal, but I felt like I wasn't processing anything, and I felt like I was in denial. And then I realized it was because the only emotions that I was having was the ones that I had marked as stupid. But we're really just like that gut reaction of, if I lived closer to home, they wouldn't be getting a divorce, that I just needed to think about for like longer than 5 minutes and be like, obviously not. But
in fact, maybe having you guys as daughters probably kept us together much longer, because we had you guys to focus on, and we do believe in, we have the same values when it comes to kids and raising the kids and everything.
You guys did a fantastic job co-parenting us, and you still do. So that was the way that I came to terms with you guys getting a divorce, was realizing that, one, for me living in Nashville, the way my life looks really isn't going to change much at all, because you guys are still going to be in contact together. I'm not going to have to choose who I spend holidays with. Like,
you might eventually, if you have to.
The most awkward thing is if you guys move out and you're both still living in Walnut Creek, who do I stay with when I'm home is going to be a weird moment, but it's still like, there's just moments. Like, there's nothing, like, my family dynamic really is not going to change much. So that was easy to come to terms with. But now we're getting off topic of the life partner. But I went through a little thing of like, I'm never going to be able to find a life partner, because if they've spent 30 years together and then suddenly it's not working anymore, then it's just, there's no hope for me. But that is not the case.
Well, and it wasn't suddenly either. We hit it well. And again, it's not been terrible.
Looked back on it and thought about Portland, and
there's been moments for sure.
Right. Yes, this has been a thing. Like, a lot, I don't want to say a lot of my childhood was marked by my parents fighting, because it wasn't. It wasn't like, oh, you guys were fighting and I was in the other room overhearing and it was bad. But I do remember fairly regular conflict at the dinner table. You guys disagreed on a lot more than you agreed on, that I remember growing up, in terms of just like conversations we had around the dinner table. And that was always like, I thought, because you guys were my blueprint for a successful relationship, I was like, oh, duh, that's how that goes. But as I've gotten older and started thinking about what I want out of a relationship, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to have someone who I can just go to and be like, man, capitalism sucks. And they're going to be like, yeah. And I'm going to be like, yeah. And we can just be mad together. Like, I've realized that, like, I don't always want to have, like, for some people it works where they want to bring something up and then have a deep conversation about it. But for me, I'm like, no, I kind of want someone who's always going to be in the similar camp as me. And what I had with Jalen was very much we disagreed on a lot. So when stuff came up, we talked about it, and we had really amazing conversations that shaped the way I approach the world and think about the world. And I wouldn't change that about who I am or what I got out of that relationship for sure. But that's not what I want out of a long-term partnership. But it was kind of what I saw growing up. So I thought that that was what it had to be. And now I'm looking back on it and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that like there were things that like I'm not destined to repeat the same, like we're together for 35 years, now we're getting a divorce kind of thing, just because I'm not my mom or my dad, and my partner is not my mom or my dad, and everything is different.
And hopefully you'll be more conscious and intentional and honest. And again, this is, a lot of you didn't see us fight because I often withdrew. We did disagree on intellectual topics. See, I don't remember us being in a lot of conflict because I avoided conflict. When it came up, that was part of that emotional reaction, and I would just retreat.
Advocate, though. You love a good devil's advocate.
Well, I don't even see it that way. I mean, I appreciate that you might, but yeah, I think issues are complicated, and I think that there's often reasons for things. And I think if you understand the reasons, then affecting change is a lot. You can be better at or have a better chance of succeeding. But you're right. I mean, a lot of times your mom, like you, wants somebody to say your feelings are valid. And in other words, I was arguing intellectually and she was arguing emotionally, and we couldn't.
You wanted empathy at times when you had advice was another way.
That's another way. That's another dynamic that we had. But it's also true that I tend not to get too emotionally charged up by events, and I'm much more intellectual about understanding the dynamics and the reasons and the history behind these things, and then articulating that as a way to explain, hey, this isn't just this terrible thing that happened. I mean, this happened for a lot of reasons, and these are them. And that's not what, a lot of times, that's not what your mother needed and needs. So yeah,
that was one of the things that was one of the things you and Jalen had in common.
Yeah.
I would come to him and I'd be like, oh, this is a situation I'm in, I'm frustrated by it. He'd be like, here's all the reasons the situation is happening. And I was always annoyed and what I eventually found was it felt like he was assuming I didn't already know those reasons. And I was like, I know why this is happening. I know why my annoying thesis committee member sent me a bunch of revisions 5 days before my due date after I sent it to him 2 months ago, is because he's a impotent jerk who needs to feel important. That's not actually why, but like I had all the reasons, but it felt always like Jalen was trying to like teach me something. And I was like, you're not like, I know, I got it. I just want you to be like, hey, that sucks. And that was never really something he had to offer. And he was never comfortable offering that. He was like, that feels unproductive. He never wanted that from me. And that was what I would give him, because he would come to me in those moments and be like, man, this is a bummer situation that I'm in. And I would be like, I'm not going to give advice because that sucks. And I want to be there for him. And then he wanted me to give him advice.
Yeah, this is not helpful. You agreeing with me isn't helpful. So, yeah.
Exactly. It was like,
that's true. And that's a dynamic that we have.
Neither of us had, our default reactions were never what the other one wanted. So, but we had to make conscious efforts. And that was one of the things that we eventually ended up working out, was that we figured out the language of going to him. Like I figured out the language of going and being like, hey, I need empathy, not advice right now. And he was able to switch gears. And then he figured out I figured out that he never wanted empathy, basically. He always wanted advice.
I don't need to feel this. I don't care.
That we could totally make a compromise work on, because you just had to figure out the other person's language, and that worked out. But in stuff like conflict resolution, where it was like, there is no compromise to be made that happens. There's no compromise where I get my immediate resolution and you get 3 days with space. That's literally not possible.
Right. So. But you have to have the communication, right? And they have to have the wherewithal and the willingness to kind of engage with your own emotions and your own thoughts. And that's where I fell down in my marriage, is I just couldn't really engage with my emotions, and that left a gap.
That's been a big issue in a lot of my relationships with men.
Yeah, I mean,
obviously, but there was definitely, I remember with Colin, we stayed together after he cheated on me a couple times, and the things that I wanted him to answer, the questions were like, why are you doing this to me? Why did you feel the need to do this? And he was like, I don't know. And he was satisfied with that. He was just satisfied with, oh, I'll never do it again. And I was like, I need to know why. And because he also never figured out why, shockingly, he did it again and again.
Well, it was too uncomfortable for him to address, I'm guessing. I mean, I don't know.
And it was a similar thing with Jalen, where we would have conflict, and the ultimate thing that was the worst about the conflict resolution was that he needed 3 days to make peace with it in his own mind, and then he did not want to talk about it. And I was like, so he'd come back 3 days later and be like, "How was your day?" And I'd be like, "I'm pissed at you."
Yeah. Well, that's, I mean, and those are, you gotta find those, you gotta find what works. And you guys were not good partners, and
no, I mean, like that's one of the things that our breakup wasn't that mutual at the time. I don't know really where he's at with it now. We haven't talked much since we've broken up. But that was one of the things that I realized, and when I tried to make clear to him when we were talking about it afterwards, because he was definitely more in a place of like, I'll do anything to make it better, and I was in a place of like, there is nothing you can do. Right. But like, I wasn't, as much as he wasn't a good partner to me, I wasn't a good partner to him either. Exactly. Like neither of us were meeting each other's needs.
Right. Where you guys were just too different for each other. And that's kind of where your mother and I are too. I mean, I think we're good friends. And, since we made the decision several months ago, we just didn't tell you about it until last month. But since we made the decision and have been living as friends, our relationship is much better. The expectations of spouse were too much for each other to handle, but the expectations of friends were able to, I think, to meet those expectations easily, not easily, but we're doing much better as friends than we were as spouses. So.
Yeah, well, it takes out, like we were talking about, with the romantic relationship being the most important, most intense, most dynamic one. Once you remove that part of it, the friend relationship is a lot less intense. Even like a best friend relationship is significantly less intense. Exactly. Obviously, I've never lived with a friend that I was married to for 30 some years, so can't really relate on that level. But I mean, none of my friendships look like the way that my relationship with Eric looks.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we've been at this for about an hour and 15 minutes.
Moment on the couch that I need to share, because there's a pile of blankets that Claire has made a nest in and fell asleep, and then Missy climbed over the pile of blankets to go mess with Claire, and Claire sat up, and that startled Missy, and Missy fell off the couch.
There they are, the cats. Anyway, we've been here a very long time.
Big one.
A lot of stuff to talk about, including naked time, which is always the awkward part of awkward family conversation.
Terrible.
But as we've learned, a very important part of intimacy. So
I know, and I'm mad about it. I'm bitter.
Well, you're welcome. So the follow-up items, I don't think we have anything to research, and there was no swearing on today's program, so no Venmo.
Go team.
What are we talking about next week, Ed?
Next week, we are talking about what's the big deal of adding to your family, of which I will be talking about cats.
Yes, well, we can talk about children, but it's just adding, other members of your family, whether they're adopted or whether they're naturally born or whether they're pets.
Yep. That's my baby. Hi, Claire.
Well, why don't you take us home, get us out of here after a very long session today.
All right. Well, until next week, you can get your Awkward Family Conversations fix at awkwardfamilyconversations.com, on Twitter at awkwardfamilyc1, and on Facebook at Awkward Family Conversations. You can watch the video version on YouTube. This week is heartbreaking. There are no cat cameos. It's shocking and upsetting. But I think we can make up for it next week. And then just to listen to the podcast, you can find us on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen. Let us know what you think. Keep the questions and suggestions coming, especially if those suggestions are more cat content. And we will be back next week. I love you, Dad.
I love you too, Ed. Have a great week.